He always felt like he was trapped in a cage, then a wyvern tore across the sky free, untouchable. In that moment he swore, one day he'd walk away from the troubleshooter life. He's Aster of the great magic house, Declan. Back in the present, Aster stands victorious. The fight's over. Now you're the last one, he says, lifting the final guy with magic ring around his throat. The captive says no mere troubleshooter could have skills like this. Aster shuts him down. He's the one asking questions and holds up a battered tome, asking if it's a magic book. The guy laughs, asks if Aster really thinks all of them came here for him. Aster raises the tome and asks how to use it. The captive says he doesn't know. If greedy Declan knew, they wouldn't have buried it in some dusty hole. Aster figures a book that dragged in this many bodies must be worth a fortune. The captive orders him to hand it over and says he'll ask the head for mercy, maybe even get Aster reinstated as a troubleshooter. Aster scoffs. What power does a mere troubleshooter manager have to promise that? He prepares to finish him and asks for last words. The captive curses at him. Just then Aster freezes. He feels an incredible aura approaching. Someone steps in and praises Aster for reacting that fast. Out of the glow walks a calm man. He introduces himself as Farin von Declan, head of the magical house Declan of the eastern continent, dripped out in a fur-collared coat, and tells Aster to hand over the tome so they can talk after. The name shakes Aster. He's been a troubleshooter under Declan for over a decade and has never seen the head in person, the strongest mage in their history, from the top house on the continent. Aster looks at him and drops, "What a pain in the ass." Farin's caught off guard by his attitude. Aster calls him shameless for trying to steal his loot. The aura coming off Farin is real, easily the strongest pressure Aster's ever felt. Farin says he could just kill him and take the book, but he'll get to the point. Hand over the tome and he'll overlook everything. He calls Aster talented. Watching the fight showed they underestimated him, then says, despite that he's still a stray from the gray zone who only knows troubleshooter trash skills. Even so, with Declan at his back right at Farin's side, Aster could make history. Return the tome and come back, he demands. Aster accepts on one condition. Farin says they can start there. Aster's condition. Give him the Yahello seat, whatever that is supposed to be, and he'll consider it. Farin's face tightens, the red aura spikes, but Aster stays cool and asks if he watched the fight. Aster chokes out the captive, dropping him at his feet. He nods at the tome. Can Farin even count how many died because of this thing? Farin sighs. So this is how it's going to be. You might die, you know. Aster agrees, then strikes first. No Naruto talk, no jutsu. Farin meets it without flinching, knocking the blow aside. Time to put you down a notch, he says, raising a hand. The ground erupts into stone spears. Aster twists away and barely clears one. Crazy bastard, Aster snaps. He looks for an opening, but every angle slams into Farin's red defense. No gaps anywhere, no openings, just pressure. So this is the power of the head of Declan. Farin sees him hesitating and says he's spacing out, then fires again. Didn't you say you need to measure to know who is stronger? Some things are obvious without measuring, like the difference between us, Farin declares like the alpha male he is. Farin's magic circle charges and detonates. The blast fades. Farin stands over him calm. I didn't kill you, I just roughed you up. Ready to talk? Roughed up, Aster asks what would happen if he bowed his head now, said he'd go back to Declan's shadow. Farin says he wouldn't believe a word of it. I'm done living like that, Aster yells. I'm done eating dog food. Blue sigils flare around his arms, then drops as a pillar of lightning toward Farin. Aster says that he's done being anyone's dog, shiny leash, big house, still a cage. Farin puts up his defense. He doesn't move, calls the attempt pathetic, and flicks the attack aside. I'll show you real power, he says, Aster's stunned. He can't push through. Pinned and staring up, that wyvern memory flashes again. He thinks back to that day, the actual reason he looked up that day. He remembers it. Farin cuts him off, surprised Aster's still on his feet, well, almost. You held out, feel the difference? Aster, leaking blood, admits it. Farin's power is insane. Farin tells him to listen. He's not here to make Aster a troubleshooter again. He wants him as head of the Bongshan family. Aster connects the dots. Declan wants Bongshan as a vassal. Farin says he wants Aster and the tome. Aster pulls the tome from his coat and offers it. Farin nods it's the right call and says this clears all his crimes. Aster lifts it like he's handing it over, then purple fire jumps from his palm and eats the book. Farin stares, demanding what he's doing. Aster shoots back that Farin said he could have it if he didn't mind it turning to ashes, and tells him to listen. He says he was never in this for money. Troubleshooting doesn't pay. He only held onto the book because it was tied to money. Farin says Aster won't die an easy death, then asks if he's heard about the troubleshooter who got eaten by Declan's young master. Aster says that bastard devoured his teammates and Declan buried it. So this is revenge? Farin asks. Aster says no, troubleshooters' lives are cheap and his team knew it. What mattered was getting what they wanted, and that takes serious money. He's retiring and he's not going back in the cage. Call that his last words. Farin raises a hand and blue flame emerges, the house's prized fire that never goes out, and orders Aster to burn and regret it. Aster holds his ground and says if the other path is being Declan's dog, he'd rather go back to the gray zone. If not, dying isn't the worst. The blue fire closes over him. He laughs through the pain, saying it's the freest he's felt in years. He knows he won't make it out and doesn't regret anything. If he's born again, he'll do it right, win his freedom and take proper revenge. Then blue energy spirals out of nowhere. Aster sits at the center, no wounds, no flames, and blinks. The fire is just gone, like someone hit pause. The pain is gone. The tome in his hand surges and floods blue light. Energy coils around him, then a warm gold circle forms. He looks down. What the hell is happening? Aster snaps awake in a filthy alley with a begging bowl at his knees, mumbling that he was just burning to death, literally. He studies his hands, then the tight street and stacked buildings that feel way too familiar. He steps out, looks up at the skyline, and it clicks Minya. This is the gray zone where he scraped by before he became a troubleshooter. He's gone back in time. He moves to a quiet patch of grass to clear his head, trying to piece it together, then notices his face and hands look younger. He tugs his collar and sees the same sigil from before on his skin. The burn didn't reset. The magic tome must have done something, honestly, though he's not sure a tome should be able to do this. He remembers the Declan family head showing up in person for it, proof it's a huge deal, but nobody really knows anything about it, so he exhales and goes, screw it. He calms himself and checks his senses. The stench from Sales Lecture Hall's sewage slaps him, too real for a dream, smell never lies. He decides he's alive and it's a fresh start, then stops and asks himself what success even is. That jogs the real dream, his and not just his. He thinks of himself and his comrades and why he chose to retire. His friend used to say they were gray zone kids with nothing and asked what hurt most. Aster guessed hunger, but his friend said the worst part was having no education. If they'd been able to study, they wouldn't be stuck under nobles. Aster told him he was fine with how things were. His friend wasn't. His friend's retirement dream was a public library anyone could use, no matter money, status, or gender. Aster decides to push it. He'll make it a tower, no deeper reason than liking tall things, and open it to everyone. He pictures shelves for every kind of book and adds one condition. A specific book has to be there. Declan's secret manual goes right at the front door, front and center, so anyone can grab it. Gray zone kids, illegitimate nobles, a butcher's son. In his head, it's stamped with the Declan crest and packed with their prized techniques, and he literally starts drooling. He knows it'll be tough, a problem for later, but shrugs it off. If he spreads Declan's manual everywhere, people will devour it. A shout cuts in, "You bastard, I've been looking for you," and a boot smashes into his head. The guy stands over him, repeating he's been looking for him, yelling he was keeping Aster's seat and accusing him of hiding, then drives another kick into his head. Aster doesn't recognize him and braces, then cracks his jaw with a clean counter, leaving the guy stunned he got hit. Mid-swing, light flickers around Aster's knuckles. Staring at his hand, he wonders, it's glowing. Meanwhile, the guy explodes about a nobody daring to hit him and demands if Aster really laid hands on his big brother. Aster makes a face, mutters it hurts like hell, though his heart hurts more. Then the thug steps on a pebble, slips and splashes into the sewer water, and Aster sprints. He calls it a tactical retreat and says he'll remember that face. Catching his breath in a narrow alley, he grabs his wrist and curses. He used to be a veteran troubleshooter who never quit, not some desk worker. One punch shouldn't sprain him. This body's too weak. He wraps it and decides, forget the tower, I need to fix this body first. He drops against the wall, annoyed and hungry, when a weird kid stops and looks at him. "You hungry?" the kid asks. Aster deflects and asks if the kid knows him. The kid says no. From the clothes, Aster figures he's a noble. The kid beams, says he's Damien and his mom is Bianca. Aster mutters he's learning things he shouldn't, then bluntly asks if the kid's right in the head. Damien says he doesn't have a mom. Aster shrugs it off with a "my bad," then adds he doesn't have a dad, so he wins. He tells Damien to beat it. He's not getting involved, planning to ditch him before it gets messy. Damien refuses and sticks to him. Aster considers just smacking him, but the kid points at his wrist. "Does it hurt?" Damien asks, reaching out to heal. Aster expects a little patch-up, then freezes. This isn't some minor patch-up, this is light of healing, not just a mere magic touch, a sacred art from a line that, in Aster's past, collapsed because of Declan. The pain vanishes and Damien grins. All done. Now Aster knows he's stepped into something dirty and dangerous, red flags everywhere, and wonders why a Blandor kid is wandering the gray zone when Blandor should still be strong. He turns the name over Damien, the kid blinks. "Did you call me?" he says, and Aster freezes at the mismatched eyes. It clicks, a Blandor with odd eyes, the monster of Blandor, the mad butcher who wouldn't stay dead. Damien von Blandor, yeah, that one. Just the name makes him tense, remembering the stories. Then Damien drops into a squat, stares at the ground, brightens, and starts counting ants. Aster just stares at the whiplash from terrifying legend to harmless kid, while Damien keeps cheerfully counting. "Seriously," Aster says. Aster remembers a job from before he regressed. The Declan family sent his squad into Blandor territory. They sprinted through the forest in cloaks, one guy grumbling about Blandor trouble again, another saying the higher-ups never tell them anything. A monster at the soft estate, dozens dead. Someone guessed it was an ogre. Aster scanned ahead, narrowed his eyes, and stopped. Not an ogre, but a man was ripping someone apart, then throwing out Soft's healing over and over to stitch the victim back together so he could keep going. He laughed through the light and blood. The monster of Blandor, Damien von Blandor. Damien blurts, "Whoa," eyes sparkling as he is still looking at ants, and Aster just stands there, stunned. Why is the Blandor air hanging around a slum? Damien stands and says, "Let's eat." He adds that his mom taught him to stay healthy by eating well and points out Aster looks sick because he doesn't. Aster admits he's right, then asks if Damien has any money. Because he doesn't, Aster is basically broke. Damien answers by whipping out a bag stuffed with gold. Aster stares, grabs his shoulder and says, "We're friends." Damien blinks all of a sudden, but Aster nods. It's decided friends share, so they'll eat with Damien's money. Damien grins, holding up the pouch. They head down the street, finally having a friend and dinner secured. After the meal, Aster pats his stuffed belly, looks like he gained 50 pounds, and says it hit the spot. He washes up and says he feels refreshed. In the hotel above the restaurant, Damien lingers in the room, not sure what to do. Aster asks what he's doing, and Damien admits he didn't know there was a house up here. He's always slept outside. It's his first time in a place like this. Damien, serious, says he doesn't have a dad either. Aster tells him not to treat it like a competition. He asks about the rest of Damien's family, where his mom is. Damien says he's looking for her. If she's not here, she doesn't count for now. Aster switches to practical stuff. How long has Damien been on his own? Damien says since he ran away, he's slept 10 times. Aster asks if someone's chasing him and if 10 sleeps means about 10 days. Damien says he sleeps a lot, sometimes twice a day, about 10 sleeps total. Aster does the math, 3 or 4 days. Damien adds he hasn't napped since he got here because the ground is too uncomfortable. Aster just lets it go. While the kid's stuck in the gray zone, Aster decides he'll watch him play nanny for a bit, basically. If that builds a tie to the Blandor family, even better. Old families mean books, and he wants a library. But first, he has to handle what's in front of him, 57 grudges, he calls them, carved into his chest from the hits he took earlier. He tells Damien he's going to lie down and not to bother him or it'll be a problem. Damien guesses it's breathing practice. Aster confirms and tells him to do it too after he's done. Damien nods. Aster lies back, closes his eyes, and focuses on his breath. He remembers how, in his past life, he leaned on stock troubleshooter spells and hit their limits. He broke into noble houses and stole techniques, barely making it out alive. What he gathered was a mystery box, night training, spirit magic, summoning, alchemy, with no single path, chaos. At the very end, right before he died, he ran into power on a different level. To reach that, he needs the right breathing. He picks Declan's foundational art, the Heavenly Origin Technique, a root method that takes any mana attribute. He memorized it once for research and now puts it to work. Red light stirs from his core as the mark on his chest flares. While he tries to keep the rhythm, heat slams through him mid-breath, his skin burning. He tells himself to focus and holds on. Then it clicks, the burn is a cleanse. The surge is flushing impurities out of his mana circuits, which shouldn't even be there. He recalls a high-grade purification used by noble bloodlines that forces mana through the body to burn waste away. Struggling, he keeps the Heavenly Origin Technique steady until it's done. The glow fades. He jolts awake, gasping, and pushes himself up. Damien sleeps softly nearby, while Aster had a near-death experience. He checks his hand and feels through his circuits, no grit mana flowing clean. It's more than a cleanse. It's purer than anything he had before, even better than in his last life. Beating Declan still feels impossible, maybe even in 100 lives, but his odds just went up. He reminds himself what he is, a troubleshooter who keeps going when the chances are near zero, wired for long shots. The next day he finishes Damien's disguise. The platinum hair is dyed brown, the clothes are plain, and Damien beams at his reflection. Aster says the important part is done, no one from the Blandor family should recognize him, then he pauses. When Damien asks what they're doing next, Aster says, "We're going to cause some chaos." The thug who jumped Damien earlier wakes on the street, stretches, and comments on the nice weather. He spots Damien and calls him the youngest, asks where he ran off to, mocks the new look, then eyes Damien and mutters the kid looks rich. Aster doesn't answer. He steps in and smashes his fist into his gut, folding him onto the cobblestones. Watching him wheeze, Aster says he's found the right place. He walks into their den, flexing his hand, and says they're still exactly as he remembers. Inside, the others look around, panicking. Someone yells for Spotty, probably the guy Aster just beat up, and another shouts that someone broke in, then squints and realizes it's the youngest. More thugs crowd in. Aster scans them, recognizing every face from his past life. He smiles, glances across the street to see how far he can push this today. As the fight starts, Damien pipes up from the side and asks, "So this is what playing looks like." Aster wraps mana around his fist and runs through the crowd, grinning as he lands clean shots, one after another until the whole group folds. Off to the side, Damien watches with huge eyes, copies the steps, mana, clench, rapid strikes. "Amazing," he says, full-on fanboy smile, completely taken by Aster's skill. Still buzzing, Damien rushes to the groaning thugs and casts healing, telling them it won't hurt and they'll be fine. One guy thanks him and Aster slides back in and drops them again. Some guy stares at the sky and mumbles, "How many times was I hit?" Aster's shirtless now, sweating, treating it as a workout. He asks one of them, "How many times did you get hit?" And the guy says he forgot. Damien asks if it's his turn, heals them again, and Aster immediately floors them again. Heal, beat, repeat. By night, it finally ends. The bruised guys line up as Aster and Damien thank them, and the whole group shouts thanks back. Aster does the math, over 100 hits per person, more than 1,000 total. He says it was a new challenge even for him, a veteran troubleshooter who's done everything except mountain battles and aerial combat, and he admits he's proud. One battered guy asks if they can leave. Aster nods, says sure, then the man adds this is their house. Aster takes it as "You want us out." His eyes flash red, and he says that'll be hard. The man panics and says they'll back off from their own place. They leave and Aster watches, noting there's no grudge, just a mess. Then he tenses up someone's coming. The steps are quiet and trained, not random, and he figures it's a pursuer after Damien. He mutters that he was careful, so how'd they find him, and he can't believe Blandor is the first to show up. He checks himself on the move. Mana's low, one spell would hurt, trading blows won't be easy, not great. He prepares anyway, gathers mana to his palm, compresses it over and over until blue light wraps around his hand and decides it's enough. He drops into position and treats it like his one shot. The man closes in and suddenly stops, ignoring Aster completely. "Goodness, young master," he yells. Aster holds the charge while the man freezes and calls out for Damien. He drops to his knees in front of Damien, Alfredo, the butler, and says he's been searching everywhere, worried sick. Damien recoils, tells him to let go, says he's not going back. Alfredo clings harder, maximum drama, swears he won't release him until he returns to the family and says they can kill him first. Aster watches, clearly disgusted. Alfredo pulls himself together, bows, and apologizes for the scene in front of the guest as he calls him. He introduces himself as the Blandor family's butler. Aster gives his name. Noting Damien seems to like him, Alfredo invites Aster to come with them. Aster knows Blandor's rule about rejecting anything dirty or noble and can't tell what they're after, but he agrees. He's building connections anyway. Their territory is on the road to the city with Xenon Academy and its famous library, and since Aster wants to build the best library himself, it's worth a stop. Alfredo goes to get a carriage. Aster thanks him, admits he's drifted off his original plan but calls it a win, and even wonders how Blandor food tastes. As the carriage rolls in, a coachman announces the Blandor mansion, the door opens, and they step down. Aster looks over the estate, his first official visit here, even in his previous life. Alfredo says it's late and tells them to rest, then assigns a young maid, Clancy, to handle Damien. She gives Damien a death stare for running off. He starts to explain he messed up, but she orders him to follow and drags him inside while he yelps. Later that night, Alfredo walks the corridors and reports to a woman in her office. He says he found Damien in the 7th black and white zone and brought him back. The room rattles with a sudden blast, but he doesn't flinch. At the zone's name, Damien's mother shoots up, demands to know if Damien's okay, a red magic circle flaring on her hand as she warns Alfredo about even a hair on her son's head. Alfredo asks her to calm down and hear him out, then explains he returned the boy safely. She lets the spell dim, then exhales and says she understands. It's a relief. Lucky nothing happened. People call her the Blood Witch for a reason. The name didn't come from nowhere. She admits she loses control when it's about her son and says it's good it ended here. She thanks him. He says he was just doing his duty. Then he adds there's one unusual thing to report. He says it's about Damien's new friend, Aster, and explains the boy sensed him before he showed himself, prepared a counter, and already had a mana bullet ready when they met. She calls that an astonishing talent for a kid from the black and white zone. Using that, Alfredo asks her for a favor. Next day, out in the light, he greets Aster with a big smile and asks him to become their successor. He's already smiling like the answer is guaranteed. He lays out the pitch: prestigious house, real pay, real status. For someone from the black and white zone, it's a rare chance. Aster looks up and answers, no. Alfredo freezes like he can't believe it. Aster doesn't budge, one hand behind his head, the other at his waist, no interest, no excitement. He doesn't explain, just meets the silence and glances off like they're done. Alfredo just stares like he must have misheard. Aster says he doesn't want to be his damn successor. He swears, and Damien asks what that word even means. Aster stops him with a hand, then thanks Alfredo for the offer but says he'd rather keep things the way they are. Alfredo struggles to get it, then nods. In his head, he decides Aster must be a gray zone kid who learned magic on his own and got cocky. He tries to relate. He grew up normal, ran wild, didn't know his limits, and says the world is huge, and when you're young and confident you think you can do anything, so you have to endure. Aster goes, not really, and he means it straight up. Alfredo brings up a metaphor, a goblin in the canyon. He says that's exactly where Aster is. Aster shrugs it off and says he's closer to a wyvern than a goblin. Alfredo figures the kid was raised in a small place and doesn't get how dangerous it is outside. He steps in hard and says Aster knows nothing, and as the butler he'll show him how big and scary the world is. He takes Aster to a training hall where a line of teens in uniforms snap to attention. They salute together, greetings to the butler master. Alfredo asks what Aster thinks. They're his age, but they're official talents of House Blando. Aster looks them over and nods. The house isn't a joke. For teens, their training shows and their mana, subtle as it is, fills the room. Then he focuses on their eyes and says under the polish they're still goblins, pretty packaging, feral core, and yeah, he can feel them. Alfredo asks if that's enough to change his mind and doubles down. Succeed him and Aster will shine like these kids, brighter than anyone. Aster turns away and says he hates the light, full anti-spotlight energy. Alfredo reaches to stop him, but Winster raises a hand and asks to speak. Winster says if Aster really felt it, he wouldn't have refused. He asks Alfredo to let him give Aster a bit of experience, not a real duel, just a taste of magic. Alfredo calls it cocky but says it's not a bad idea, then asks Aster if he's up for a simple match with the trainee. Aster looks between them. He knows they see him as the lucky vagrant who showed up out of nowhere and got hyped too fast. He asks if he can pick his opponent, and when Alfredo says yes, he points to one, then another, then a third and a fourth and goes, yeah, you too. He picks 5 at once, humble as he is. The room stalls, some of them looking unsure. Aster steps forward with a grin and asks if they're scared, then tells them to go die. The 5 line up across from him. Alfredo grins, laughs, and says that's the kind of spirit a successor should have. Then he narrows his eyes and asks if Aster can take responsibility for those words. Challenging them like this could be seen as insulting House Blando. Aster says he'll take responsibility. Alfredo raises a finger and sets the terms. Last 1 minute and Aster gets a gift. Fail and Alfredo will hold him accountable. Aster figures responsibility probably means becoming the butler's successor, the old man still trying to reel him in. The instructor asks if 1 against 5 isn't too dangerous. Alfredo waves it off, says that's why it's worth doing and Aster's stubbornness needs to be broken anyway. The instructor worries Aster already looks unfocused, and if the young master's guest gets hurt, his own job could be over. Damien watches with his maid Lancy. The flustered instructor rushes over, begs Damien to stop the butler. Damien says he's shocked too, but Lancy warns that if he steps in, his mother, Lady Gamo Bianca, will scold him. Alfredo cuts in and tells the instructor to begin. The instructor sighs and moves to start. Lancy tells Damien she's stepping out and asks him not to get involved. He nods. Outside, the instructor starts to set a turn-based duel. Alfredo cuts him off and says make it a free-for-all. The instructor gives in, announces a free-for-all until one side surrenders and lays out the rest of the rules. He adds he can stop at any time, then raises his hand to start. Across from Aster, Winster is fuming. He calls Aster a vagrant brat and says the young master and the butler might pity him, but that won't save him, he'll crush him. Begin, the instructor shouts. Aster doesn't hesitate. Winster gets blown back and dropped before anyone processes it. He blinks around and sees the others are already down too. He's the last one half standing. Aster stands there with a small grin and blue light gathering on his hand and tells them not to underestimate the little gun. Winster the loudmouth babbles about magic bullets, says they're just basic mana control, too costly, useless in a real fight. Aster says second lesson, don't judge people so easily, then snaps more shots straight at their heads. He closes the distance on Winster, face to face, and says the third lesson, the world is vast and bitter. He launches Winster with a punch and tells them that from here on out, he's going to force these experiences into them for free. Winster clutches his head and yells this isn't magic, calls Aster a lunatic. Aster says it is physical magic, then drives a blue-charged kick into Winster's face and sends him flying. The referee freezes, whistle basically decorative, and everyone around the ring just stares. Aster wiped them out like it was nothing. Alfredo watches closely, recognizes Aster's shot as a magic bullet, and guesses it was compressed 4 or 5 times, which is insane precision. That kind of control is real mana management, and he can tell there's more to Aster than just one trick. He remembers their first encounter, he used the same kind of attack, and if it had landed, things would have gone very differently. He stares amazed. How is he so good at beating people up? Damien steps in beside Aster and they fall into their little routine. Aster drops a batch with clean hits, Damien heals them, and as soon as they're steady, Aster drops them again. The doors swing open and Lady Gamo strides in with her attendant, the ref looking relieved like a lifeline just walked in. She asks Alfredo what happened and he stammers, well, I just wanted to run a simple test. She takes in the groaning trainees and says, you call this a test? She switches to orders, gather the trainees and pull them out. Damien, back to your room. Aster, back to yours now. Then she calls for instructor Runfit. He steps forward saying he did his best, but she cuts him off. You're fired. He freezes, poor guy just followed Alfredo's orders and got fired for it, he's out. That night at the estate, she calls Alfredo in. Calm but firm, she says she understands what he was trying to do, but he crossed the line. He lowers his head, admits he lost his temper, and says he'll take whatever punishment comes. She asks about the spar. Aster mixed it up with the trainees, so what exactly happened? Did Damien help? Alfredo hesitates, replaying Aster closing distance and dropping people with sharp, clean strikes, then snaps out of it and says no. It wasn't about help. Aster was just incredibly good at hitting people, like crazy efficient. He apologizes for spacing out and explains the technique. Aster used a magic bullet again, compressed 4 or 5 times for power that takes tight mana control. Even if she missed pieces, the result was clear. Aster dropped 5 trainees by himself, numbers do not lie. Lady Gamo can't believe it. He did all that with a mana bullet. She points out that handling raw mana like that is hard even for top mages. She asks about the successor proposal, and Alfredo says Aster rejected it outright. She takes a slow sip of tea, says she'll need to reassess him, and tells them to bring Aster in. Aster steps in. Lady Gamo greets him and invites him to sit. Damien's beside her, casually munching cookies. Aster sits across from them and says he came because she called. Before getting to the point, Lady Gamo brings up Alfredo's promised gift. Aster remembers Alfredo telling him to hold out for a reward. He didn't expect it this soon or prepared by her. She slides a long box across the table and tells him to open it. He lifts the lid to a golden glow and recognizes a high-grade item. He points out how rare it is. Blandor only gives something like this to recruits headed for top mage divisions. A meal is goodwill, but a gift like this usually has strings. For a wager reward, a mid-grade item would make sense. This is too much. Lady Gamo tells him to take it. It's recognition for helping Damien in the gray zone and an apology for today. Aster pushes back and asks straight. If he eats it, is he being pushed to join Blandor? Is there poison? Any conditions? She answers plainly, no ties, no poison, no requirements. She keeps it simple. There really are no conditions, it's nothing more than a gift. Aster relaxes and grins, calling it an unexpected bonus. Then she lays out a proposal. She'll arrange his admission. Will he attend the academy alongside Damien? Damien was supposed to enroll last year, but he pushed back, so they delayed it, and she didn't expect him to run away. She's asking now because Damien actually likes him. Damien brightens, if I'm with my friend, I'm fine with it. He's in as long as Aster is there. Aster nods, it makes sense. He also gets why it matters to her. Forcing Damien in might just make him run again, and the clean way to change his mind is for Aster to go with him. He weighs it in silence. It would help him too, ties matter here, but it still feels like a leash. He says he'll think about it and Lady Gamo accepts, asking him to let her know when he's decided. Then she asks why he turned down Alfredo's successor offer. Aster pauses, gives a half smile, and says his knees are too precious to waste on kneeling. He brings up how Alfredo rushed to Damien and practically groveled. He won't live like that, even as a successor. Lady Gamo stares, surprised by how blunt that is. Outside the door, Alfredo is listening, wondering is he serious.